Good evening, everybody. It's Tuesday night, it's cheese night, and I have the delectable, the fantastic, the amazing, the awesome, the iconic, the not wearing purple tonight, Mary Quicke. Good evening, Mary. How are you?
Put your hand
over the
good.
camera.
So good to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not wearing your fantastic red hat. What happened?
I've been doing yoga.
Oh, the yoga has got to the West Country, has it?
Ooh, so I'm very chilled. So very chilled and ready for some cheese.
Marvelous. Right, for everybody who's watching tonight, we are talking. Mary Quicke has very graciously come on. Is going to tell us about how flavors come into cheese outside the dairy, from farming to milking to terroir, and how she. I mean, let's start off by Mary. Tell us about your farm. How long have you been there? What's the story?
Okay, so my family have been on this farm for 14 generations. Well, I think it's about 1537, but we say 1540 to be on the safe side. And that was 14.
Stop. 1537.
Yeah.
Now my history's a bit patchy, but did you nick your lands off some monastery? Did Henry VIII do you a favour?
Well, Henry VIII did somebody a favour, and their daughter was married by this aspirant young Quicke.
Mr. Quicke. He was quick off the mark.
Who's actually one of the few Saxon families who retained land through the conquest.
Wow.
Norman conquest.
So 1537, let's call it 1520. So that's 500 years you've been making cheese.
Not quite. Not me personally. I know cheese is great for longevity, but not quite that long.
Not quite. So you haven't got a 1537 cheese up your sleeve that you're going to reveal
I do not have.
17 years time.
Cheese has been made on this farm. You know, dairy is what you would have done.
Yeah.
In this farm over the years, but it was my mum who built this cheese dairy in 1973. I've just been to see my mum, and I said, "I'll tell them all about you building the dairy, Mum."
So, wow. So, but they would have made cheese. But I mean, people made cheese forever. Whether there were cows, there were cheese. Whether there was sheep, there was cheese. There was goats, there was cheese. So you'd have been making it
and
somewhere.
In every house on the farm, there is in the farmhouse, there are dairies.
Yeah.
You know, either with slate or with marble, depending on how posh you are. And that's where you would have made your, in a cool place on the north side of the building. The beautiful building material in this part of the world is cob, which is 2 foot, 3 foot thick walls of subsoil.
Fantastic.
And straw. Yeah, which keeps everything beautifully even in temperature. Great place for making cheese.
So there is no better pedigree than yours. Is that what you're saying? You are legitimately the queen of cheese.
Well, there are so many amazing people in cheese. I couldn't claim that title at all.
No, we've actually got Sarah on tonight. Hello, Sarah. Just going to say this because she calls herself Queen of Cheese. So obviously we're going to have. I don't know what the collective noun for queens is. A cabaret. Just saying. We have lots of queens of cheese, and everybody's welcome. Okay, so tell us about your pastures. What have you got? What big fields, small fields, lots of hedges, hills, dales. What's going on?
Lots of, a beautiful valley watered by the River Creedy, which drained off Dartmoor. So when Dartmoor was twice as big as the Himalayas, but it's now not. It's just little hills now, and we live in this beautiful valley, which is a mix of red soil and clay, and the beautiful alluvial mix of the two, which is where our spring herd grazes. So we're really grass based. That's a big deal for us. Our cows are grazing from the target is Valentine's Day till Christmas. Well, just till Christmas Eve. Wow. That's when we dry the last cows off. Last year we didn't make it to Christmas because it was so wet, but they went out in January. In other words, we couldn't. The grass was growing before Valentine's Day.
So slow down. Remember, we've got people who aren't farmers listening. So when you mean Christmas Day to Valentine's Day, you are keeping your cows on the fields, not in the barns, for what is that, 46 weeks a year.
Yeah,
And
all but about 65 days or something.
yeah, and they come in on Christmas Eve. You know, they do midnight mass, and then it's into the barns until Valentine's Day. I have to say, that's very wise thinking. The 6 weeks of the year I dislike most, so that Christmas to Valentine's Day. Let's park that off. They're off watching their box sets, and then they're back out on the spring grass.
Yeah, well, and the spring herd by that time is dry, bless them. Their holidays, their sort of late pregnancy holiday, is spent outside eating crops.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's break that out as well. So your spring herd, how many herds you got?
A spring herd. So we want to have even milk in the cheese dairy, and even amount of. We don't want ever too much late lactation milk, because it doesn't taste right. That's not right so good for cheese making. So we want a spring herd, 6 months, which calves February and March, and the autumn herd calves August and September. So together, those two sine curves make sort of more or less flat.
Even each other out. I don't know what I'm doing with my hand here, but that kind of thing.
And that we've never got too much late lactation milk, because that's too fatty, the proteins are too weak, the flavours aren't correct. So
how long do they milk for? So is that eight months or something?
305 days. I mean, they're pregnant for as long as we are. 10 lunar weeks, 10 lunar months, 9 calendar months. And they will always have 6 weeks off for their, pre-pregnancy. They want to grow the calf. They want to have a chill and a rest and to chat to them.
You give them a break. So are the herds roughly equal sizes, and how many in your herds?
Sorry, I didn't answer that. 300 cows in each.
Wow, so you've got 600 ladies wandering around your farm.
Beautiful mixed, and because we want them to graze outside, not so much yield, not so much milk, we want them to be able to walk out to the pastures, and we need them to be really fertile little girls and great for cheese making. So we've got this crossbred mix of
what?
Well, Friesian, a little bit of Holstein, the black and white normal dairy cow. We cross those with Swedish red.
Okay.
Which looks like a red and white version, it looks like an Ayrshire.
Okay.
There are good I can go into all nerdy on you about the different breeds, and then also some Montbéliard, teeny bit of Jersey. We look at the cows. How are they walking? How is their milk? What are the flavours like in the cheese? Because each breed's got a sort of subtly different contribution to flavour, and we taste and we go, maybe a little bit. We need a bit of, the cows aren't looking quite strong enough. We need to put a bit of strength in them with a Montbéliard, and the Montbéliard brings a very distinctive protein.
So if I put 4 glasses of milk in front of you, I put a Friesian, a Holstein, a Montbéliard, and a Swede, and didn't tell you which is which, would you be able to tell the difference from the milk?
Ooh, that's really interesting. It's probably more about. Well, certainly a Jersey is terribly distinctive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, what I don't know, actually, is the Swedish red Ayrshire. They've got very, very teeny weeny fats.
Mm.
And so I think they taste more buttery in the mouth.
Okay.
But
COVID's over,
they're all crossbred. So.
When COVID's over, we should do this. We should get a whole bunch of Academy of Cheese people, and we'll have a milk off, and we'll get lots of different breeds of milk. And we'll see if we can taste the difference.
Well, and what's really interesting is how different grass-fed milk is. The grass-fed milk, you've immediately got, I think the technical definition is cow's breath. Now, for those of us who maybe haven't had the intense privilege of sniffing a cow's breath, that may not be a very attractive smell.
We will now queue up for it. That's clearly the right. Right after we've drunk their milk, we're going to go and smell cow's breath.
And it's warm, animally, with some lovely, gentle sort of grassy notes. And it's that kind of flavour you get coming through kind of the minute. It's really interesting. You taste cheese that has from where the cows have been out just for a day, and the milk the next morning, the cheese the next morning will have some of those grassy flavours, grassy notes to them.
So, I mean, I've always understood that. I mean, we're dotting around here a bit, but that's one of the big challenges for the cheesemakers, the moment when you have the big transition from the cows being inside to outside. Because on the lead into Christmas, you're already beginning to feed them nuts and supplement their feed in the fields, which continues into the barn. So there isn't that step change in the same way. But coming out, you have that wham, bam, silage. Do you do silage? We
do so for the autumn herd. You do so, but of course the grass at that. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed what the grass is like on Valentine's Day. It doesn't grow all that fast, so we are quite gently easing them off. I mean, it gets to, there's a day in grazing terminology called Magic Day, which is where the amount that the cows need to eat and want to eat is equal to the growth rate out there.
When's that?
Usually late March, early, depends. And depends, on if you're up a hill, it'll be April or even May,
But after that, the cows are eating more than the grass is growing.
Yeah, and so they'll be largely on grass. There's a little bit of cake in the parlour, a few nuts in the parlour, because come on, girls, this is where you want to be. I mean, when you're first calved, for those of us who have lactated, we know we need milking. Just no kidding. Sorry, Charlie. A bit female, but hey,
I'm not commenting.
Of any kind is basically all about the females.
All about the females. Well, such is life, unfortunately. So you've got these cows. You've got 300 in a herd. They've all got to be within walking distance of their parlour. There is no other way to milk a herd. So you must have 2 milking parlours.
Yeah.
And you have the one down in your main farm, I understand.
In the valley, down in the valley, and the other is up on the hill.
And you've chosen a slightly unusual dairy for the second one. It's a stripped down dairy. It's almost open to the elements for your hill dairy.
Yeah, it is. It's a parlour with a view. It's got no sides to it. It's got a lid, like a sort of bicycle shed lid, but open to the outside.
And that's a New Zealand inspiration. I remember visiting it. You were quite excited about the way that it would, it's a lower environmental footprint and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, because the cows are outside, they really don't want it. Cows don't like particularly coming inside, it's dark or darker. So, something that's really easy and attractive for them to just move through on their way, get milked, release themselves of their milk, and then back out to pasture again.
So how much what's the yield on your cows? I mean, a high yielding one is sort of 30 plus litres a day. You hear of 40 litres a day for some big Holstein Friesians. What do you reckon you get?
Well, obviously different stages of lactation, just over 20 probably, but it's quite, it's quite good solids in it.
Yeah.
I mean, we might get up as high as 30 for one herd for about 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
But
when they're really cooking on gas and they're full steam ahead, and then it falls off again.
Yeah, I mean they come to a peak at 6 weeks after calving, and then it gradually moves down from there. And but the other herd will peak at 20, 25. 20, 25 probably, and they and they will, and the milk has a different flavour at different parts of that lactation.
So enough about the cows for a second. Let's talk cheese. Come on, let's bring it back. So you've got 3 cheeses you've sent me. Marvelous. And you have them on the label, and we're going to have to talk about this gentleman a bit later. Your little kind of, I don't know what he is, that kind of horsey with horns that you've got knocking around, but we'll come back to him. But we have buttery, mature, and vintage. Yeah. So talk to me, before we tuck in, and you talk to me about how you guide flavors. How do you measure them? How do you do your grading? So that's the output. You've got to control it through your feed and your farm, but What are you looking for in the output?
And also starters and the make, but we can talk about that. But actually, in terms of, so we grade all vats at 3 months old. We take a quart 3 months old, and at that point, we will select out an intensely buttery flavour, and it's relatively rare. Actually, although the last grading was amazing, we had buttery notes, and very low acidity, and just a really sort of buttery note there. And that will go to our buttery, and that's 3 months old. Well, this cheese was made on the 7th of May of this year, and so
this is the buttery one we're tasting.
Yeah, so that is now 7th of May. Oh, it's a little bit older than 3 months.
May, June, July, August, September. So that's just sort of
4 months. It's 4 months.
6 months.
Isn't it? Yeah.
May,
Well,
no.
10 months. Yeah, 5 months. Five. Well, we're in the 10th month, and it was made in the 5th month.
5.5 months. I'll set with you 5.5. So this is your youngster. This is your youngest one, and you have called it buttery because those are the dominant flavors.
Yeah, that's right. And then mature, we would need to be at least 12 months old. But what with COVID, we dropped the temperature in our store so it wouldn't race away. But this was made on the 6th of November. So nearly 2 years old. And normally, we would normally have a month old. Are we tasting now, Charlie? Or
I think you've got that wrong. I think your mature is a 12-month cheese, and your vintage is 24.
No, but we've dropped the temperature in our cheese store to suppress it. That was made in March of the previous year.
Okay, I'm going to just eat some cheese because I'm getting confused by these dates. So your buttery works out at roughly 5 to 6 months. That's where you're going.
Yeah.
That's very easy eating.
Yeah. It's and the idea is you get this intense buttery hit at the back.
It is, and you get that kind of, it's not a tang, but it's a kind of salivation on the underside of the tongue.
So that's what we're looking for. Very, very, very young. So you've got almost no difference in cheese flavour to the towards the rind. It's slightly darker towards the rind, so you get some element of sort of drying out. I mean, why cheesemakers like to cut nose to rind is because with a rinded cheddar, cheese loses moisture from the rind. So it's you see it more in the mature cheddar. It's darker towards the middle, towards the edge, and so it's lost moisture. What drives cheese maturation is moisture. So you effectively get completely different cheeses at the centre, halfway back, and under the rind.
Okay, can you expand on that? Drying out drives maturation. What do you mean by that?
Well, the processes of maturation. Maturation is, slow and hopefully beautiful breakdown of the sugars and the lactose in the milk through lactic acid, through to a complete breakdown of that. It's all on its way to carbon dioxide and water, of course, like all of us are, and the proteins on their way. That they're being slowly matured,
digested or fermented,
and same as the fats. And all of those processes happens much faster in the presence of moisture. So if a very moist cheese like a brie, 6-8 weeks and you're done. A very, very dry cheese like a Gruyere or a Parmigiano Reggiano, very, very, very dry. Well, kind of as dry as our vintage, or even drier than that. Those maturation processes will happen very, very slowly. And so in a cheese like this, I picked up the vintage, where it's a lot going to be with a cloth bound cheese. There's going to be a lot more moisture lost immediately under the rind. So those flavours will be quite different to the flavours at the heart of the cheese, which has got a lot more moisture. And of course, you get the other impact of the rind, the cloth-bound rind with gorgeous aroma, which is the aroma of our cheese store. And there's a whole specific ecosystem that belongs to our farm.
Yes.
That grows on that rind. So you not only have the differential moisture creating the different cheeses, but you've also got this amazing ecosystem of molds and fungi and just great stuff that belongs to this farm. And that is where a lot of our distinctive flavors come from.
So this is about building up a flavor profile, which you manage, for lack of a better word, that belongs to absolutely nobody else. You've got your herd, that's your choice. That's your
soil. So different soils produce different flavored milks. Just saying.
And do you have different soils? Do you have different soils about your farm where you can see that in the milk?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, then we've got the red soil where the spring herd is based. And it's got some clay as well, but mainly on the red. And the autumn herd is based on an alluvial mix of the two.
And can you taste that?
They're definitely related. Do you know what I mean? It's not like them poles
not
apart.
Completely different. Yeah. And you think you can taste that in the milk? That comes through the milk or comes through more in the cheese?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, tasting milks from different individual farms, and the milks do taste, subtly different. Milk on one level, milk is milk, but they do taste subtly different. And how much? Certainly, there's the grass fed. Certainly, there's a stage of lactation. Certainly, there's a breed element, and then I suspect that part of that is soil as well.
So, if you were to put those in order, as in what's got the biggest influence on the flavour of a one truckle, what would you if you could only pull the lever on one of those variables? Which one would you want to keep your hands on most tightly?
I think grass-fed's really, really important. It gives a whole layer of complexity that you just simply don't get with, certainly in my view, with maize feeding or even with grass silage.
Because
I think hay, we don't. Devon's not a great place for growing for hay. Which is why all of our cheese-making styles don't rely on hay-fed milk. But I think hay, you probably would get quite a lot of those aromatics, but a lot of the aromatics have already dried out in hay.
So I remember you talking to me when I visited your farm, one of the times I visited your farm, where you use different grazers to manage which bits your cows are feeding on. It's like you don't want them feeding them too low down the grass, or I can't remember, you had some phrase. Did I completely make that up, or is that something you're actually doing?
No, it's really important to us. I mean, and that's partly about making sure there's enough grass ahead of the cows so that we can graze right the way through the season. They're on these individual little paddocks, new bit of grass every 12 hours. And if they just eat the top leafy part, it's not very fibrous. So the milk will probably lack fat. So that you would then tend to get quite a sort of hard, firm curd, just the ratio of the fat and the protein.
Too much casein, not enough fat kind of thing.
Yeah. Too much protein probably. And then at the bottom, or if you think if they've grazed right down and you've left them, then it's much more stalky right at the bottom. And stalky is more fibre, and more fibre creates more fat. And more fat brings over more, both it can be more luscious, but to excess, it brings too much moisture through into the curd. And that can then create a rather acid curd.
So there's a kind of Goldilocks bit of the grass blade that how do you make sure they only eat that bit? Do you get somebody else to eat off the top and you move them on before they get to the bottom? How does that work?
Well, you measure the grassland and say we turn them out in when it's probably about 2,700 kilos of dry matter a hectare, we go around measuring the grass, and we'll have them graze down ideally to 1,500 kilos of dry matter a hectare.
I'm just going with that. I obviously have no idea how you would say, looking at a field, that's certain dry mac to her, but you know.
Well,
so
we have got something we call the pasture meter, which a plonker that you plonk down a circular thing on a spring, and it counts how far up the barrel of this thing that the circular ring goes.
Right.
But and then you can train your eye to see what it looks like.
Once you've measured it a few times, you can sort of get a feel for it, kind of thing.
Yeah, and we do like to keep measuring so that keeps it consistent across different people measuring the grass.
Amazing. Okay, back to the cheese. So we've got our easy to eat, slightly sweet, buttery, no big aromatics, no farmyard, no mustiness. Kids would love it, kind of buttery special. 6 months. Where are we going next?
Well, we're mature.
Okay.
Now, we have suppressed the maturation on this because of COVID. So the store's quite cold.
Right. I'm just going to say that in layman's language. You're slowing down the cheese. You're slowing it down by chilling it down. So you hold the store at what temperature normally?
Well, we would normally hold it at 10, and it's now at 8.
Okay.
2 degrees. So
even before we get to the texture, before the taste, texture is completely different.
Yeah. Lost quite a lot of moisture.
Mm-hmm.
That will be about maybe 36% moisture. This one will be down to about 32%.
Okay.
Moisture. And it will have lost it. And if you taste the bit close to the middle, and if you taste a bit halfway back.
I'm on it. Hang on. I've done the close to the middle bit. Now looking for the halfway back bit.
And if you squidge it, you can see it's a bit firmer still.
Oh yeah, definitely. And actually, you can squidge it down the piece, and it feels firmer at the edge quite noticeably.
And then take a squidge under the rind. Take a bit from under the rind.
And it's interesting because the other characteristic, because it's so much drier, you need to chew it more and allow more moisture to get from your mouth into the cheese before the flavors. So relatively speaking,
I think that's almost because it's a little bit drier, and you get more, if you like, there are more layers of flavor, not necessarily about the flavor, but about just the time you spend chewing it and it takes to release. But
so take this cheese and track it back to your farm. What month are we tasting here?
So this one here, as it happens, is 6th of November, 23 months ago. And so you've got, it's got a little bit drier because it's of that age, and you've got those impacts coming towards the end of lactation with the cows. Coming towards the end of being out at grass. The autumn herd will be, so this milk will be largely from the autumn herd, so that they're now in full milk. We're getting them in calf at this time. They're really lots and lots and lots of milk, and they're going round their last round of the grazing.
I might be making this up because you just told me, but I think it tastes a bit autumnal. I think it has a sort of dry, leafy kind of flavor to it. But I just could, because you told me it is, and I'm making it up. Which it's so
flavorish, and that's one of the things I think it's really important. With the Academy of Cheese, we're looking to develop people's cheese vocabulary, but it's also giving a real primacy, I think, to your own taste buds. The purpose of training yourself and using those words is not so you taste the same as me, but so we've got a common language that we can speak about it.
Yes,
but what you taste matters most.
And we never. I sometimes feel that with the sort of more dogmatic taste programs, more in sort of wine than cheese, there's a right and a wrong, and I feel that that's got a certain sadness to it because I want to hang on to my experience of the cheese. I want to know what you're tasting, and I want to know perhaps what it's believed it should taste like. But I don't want to lose my perspective in that journey.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I'm getting some acidity there. Well, what we're looking for in these cheeses is a balance of our flavours, and our flavour families are sharp, oniony, grassy, then umami, buttery, and then the other flavour family. Where have I gone? I've got umami and buttery, and then there's sort of and then there's sort of your savoury umami. So buttery caramelly. Sorry, that was why I was getting muddled. Buttery caramelly, and then the other flavour family would be sort of savoury, meaty, brothy umami. And what I'm looking for in our best cheese would be a beautiful, complex, unfolding balance of those three flavour families.
So you want all three flavour families present. It's not a case of some cheeses lean this way and some cheeses lean that way. Those are the sort of common best flavours for your cheese.
Well, but if we go on to the vintage.
Well, before we move on, I just want to make a comment about this. The mature, those buttery caramel flavours for me only really appear once I've got a lot of moisture in the mouth, and it's sort of in the back half of the flavour.
Well,
I mean,
and what I'm really interested in is if you like that timing of flavour, how it occurs with it on one's palate. You know, we tried to do a sort of visual representation. Well, first you get sharp, and then you get savoury, and then at the end, you maybe in a sort of unfolding butteriness. Because, I mean, what I want with our cheese is you get lots of fun out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it just keeps coming. It just like it's that person who goes, and another thing, and then just do something new. Right. I am on a ridiculous diet at the moment, which fortunately ends tomorrow night, so I can't wait for that. So I've got nothing to clear my palate, but you've got some ciders, I believe.
Yeah, well, I've got really interested in the apple. I mean, that thing, what grows together goes together. And I'm trying this Smith Haynes cider. So it's a sort of traditional method.
Show us the label. Okay.
And it's got some nice tannins in it, a little bit of sharpness. I don't know what apple variety. Well, it's a 2017 vintage, so it's
Well, if you speak to the cider makers, they will say with complete confidence and the history to prove it that we invented the method champenoise in this country to bottle ferment cider, and that Dom Perignon was a Johnny-come-lately, and nothing to do with the French at all. But the French disagree with that.
Yes, but I think
you're now allowed to go vintage. Mary, tell us about your vintage.
Oh, the vintage. Well, this occurred. It occurred because we were keeping some cheeses for our farm shop. And in foot and mouth disease in 2001, we closed our farm shop. We didn't want anyone coming onto the place because of, fear of infection of our cows. And on the nose, you can get this sort of caramelly notes.
I was about to say this is sweeter, which wasn't what I was expecting.
It's certainly not with a sweet starter. Although there are
it's not that kind of sugary sweetness or condensed milk sweetness, which is that starter version. This is definitely the caramel end of the spectrum.
So when we're grading at 12 months of age, which is a selection grading, anything that what we're looking for is it's got to be all of those complex flavors I was talking about before, but really leading with that sort of caramel note.
It's fascinating because when you get most cheddars going up to the 24 age, you expect more savory notes, more acidity, more what I call base notes, if I can put it that way. But yours consistently doesn't. It stays in that higher register flavor profile. And just gets more complex, and the sweetness heads off into this sort of burnt caramel direction.
Well, I think that's partly, I think, because over the years, well, I mean, I'm not a fan of bitter at all. I'm quite sensitive to bitter. So you'll find for a cheddar, very, very little sort of bitter notes. And also, I want these slow unfolding flavours, which means lots and lots of steps along the way, both in terms of the kind of milk that we've got, the ratio of the fat and protein in the milk, but also how we make it is about driving moisture out. We make one of the driest curds of a cheddar maker. And this will be 29% moisture or something or other, and it loses moisture in the.
I mean, that's very unusual. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I would have put, farmhouse cheddar at the 12 to 14 month up at the sort of late 30s% moisture, not down where you're talking about.
Well, I guess or when we make, typically it's 36, 37, about gets down to 34 at 12 months, 32 at 18, and then up at this age, you'll be well under 30. So
in Waking Whiskey, they call that the angel share or something, don't they? So what do you call it in cheese making?
The aroma of our cheese store, our cathedral of cheese. I don't know, it'd be great, because I mean it's the same thing in making balsamic vinegar, isn't it?
Well, but yeah, kind of. Balsamic is that repetitive cycling through different pots and that kind of thing.
But it's about losing moisture.
It is.
Sorry,
it is.
Talking with my mouth full.
Yeah, well, I have to say, so I'm going to just lastly, before we sort of have to come to a close on your fantastic company, there are a few hellos actually. I've got James from number 2 said hello. Where have you gone, James? You're up here somewhere. He said he had lunch with you in Bergamo. That feels a few years ago now that we were actually allowed out of the country.
Oh, I know. And Bergamo was just the centre of all of that difficulty. I stayed at an Airbnb and I communicated with my host, and they said it was pretty weird. Just staying in their flat apartment just for months on end.
All right. So
hi, James.
Hi, James. Yes. Hi. We've got lots of people. Pete's there, and lots of hello, Sally. Right. So, if you were to say, briefly, what is it about your farm that sets you apart from Montgomery's and Keens and Westcombe? What is it? What does your farm bring to your distinctiveness?
Well, obviously different soil types, but I think the key thing is the amount of time we're spending out grazing. I mean, Keens are largely housed inside. Westcombe have got a sort of normal, I believe, sort of 6 months in, 6 months out. Jamie Montgomery uses quite a lot of maize silage, and you have the cows that work with those conditions. The more inside diet and the more inside the cows are, the more you go to it in a Holstein direction. Nobody else is using crossbreds as far as I know. I mean, Jamie's got that herd of Jerseys, which he uses.
But he's not putting them into his cheddars.
Not into the cheddar, no. Terribly difficult to do that. So he would have more a sort of classic Holstein Friesian as would Westcombe would. So,
and how would you conclude that what flavour? What's unique about your flavour against the other cloth-bound cheddar makers?
Well, I think you've got some of these buttery notes, and I think the Swedish Red breed definitely brings that. Quite a lot of the grass-based diet can give quite a lot of fat in the milk, but we've got a nice strong protein given by both the Swedish Red and the Montbéliard that can really hold that as a good body. So you've both got, I think, Jason Hines of Neal's Yard said, well, the thing about your cheeses is that they're always luscious.
I always think of your cheese as the spring cheese of the crop. If you can, the 4 or 5 great cheddars of the West Country, I think as yours as the spring one. You always have these light, sunshine, high registered flavors like butter, like the grassy notes. In fact, this one I've gone back to the mature, and I'm getting even a little bit of pineapple. And I thought, it's the bird song of cheddar.
Well, yeah, and I just feel I'm excited. It feels like we're working with this gorgeously unknowable microflora in the soil of the soil. And then we're this gorgeously unknowable microflora in cows' rumens, the gloriously unknowable microflora in traditional starters, and then the gloriously unknowable molds that sit on the outside with this gloriously unknowable progression of maturation. I mean, I love the fact that we're sitting on top of this succession of amazing unknowables, and we're just trying to coax, if you like. Well, I was thinking it's like sort of Michelangelo producing the statue of David out of a piece of marble. We've got this glorious vat of milk, and out of that we're teasing and coaxing wonderful flavors out of it.
Well, on that fantastic note, Mary, I think we should all go to our beds dreaming of beautiful cheeses in the hand of Michelangelo's David. It's been fantastic to talk to you. You're an amazing person. We love the fact that it's not just you, but generations of you that have created such great cheese in the West Country. And I know I can speak for the people who are watching, say thank you for being one of the most interesting talks we've ever had. All right. I just probably need to say, I didn't know if anybody knows, Mary's a founding member of the Academy of Cheese. Thank you very much for being on that one as well. We know you're passionate across the industry. And we've got lots of online courses available for those people who might be listening that haven't become Academy of Cheese Level 1. And I keep promising to do Academy of Cheese Level 2 online for those people who want it. And I promise you, we're going to start in November, sort of mid-November time. So if you haven't done it, sign up with me or the Academy. All right. On that note, Mary, should we say goodbye?
Goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye. Great to be here.